Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. And our first story about another landlord. Let's start with this one today. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Greedy landlord went one step too far. Background: college student living in a college city. Lived in the dorms first year, then in an apartment the next years. In our college town/city, you had to pay a finder's fee to the current tenant to move in. This was essentially paying them for their deposit when you moved in, as there was not any formal rental contract. There were literally flyers up listing apartments with rent and the finder's fee on campus, so this was standard practice. Anyway, a buddy and I moved into one apartment in the middle of our second year, in a triplex where two of the three roommates had moved, all three in one of the apartments. The third guy had been living there for a number of years, done undergrad and grad school there, and was the contact point for the landlord. We paid him and he paid the full rent. Note that this was not a sublet, just that we paid in total in one check. This is important. So our third roommate moves, graduates, and hands over the utilities, landlord info, etc. to me to handle before the start of summer. He'd gone through a few landlords over this time and has not had a new lease/contract for years. So I take over and pay the bills during the summer. I become the POC, utilities in my name, important later for legal standing, and I was paying the rent, also important. Note, you were stuck paying summer rent to keep a good apartment close to campus. So we paid for the apartment for the summer. Start of the chess match. So fall hits and school starts. We get a call for the landlord. He says he didn't know anything about us and wanted us out. If we pay more rent, we can stay. So our rent goes up from $750 to $900 with 10 days verbal notice. So we suck it up since we can't move now, too late, and we paid all summer just to have the place, and the extra was not that bad. Keep in mind, this was when minimum wage was $3.25 an hour, so $150 is still a hit for three poor college students. Yes, this is from a while ago. So then as the semester gets to an end, the landlord then decides he wants to raise the rent to like $1,500 or $2,000 or he'll evict us. He gives us 30 days notice to get out over Christmas break if we will not pay. None of us could cover that amount, 2 times, 3 times where we started. We were all on financial aid. Well, after talking to some people, we find out we should look into rent control laws. Check. Well, guess who has not properly registered or followed any rent control laws? Yep, this landlord. So we spend $500 on a lawyer and end up going to rent control court. Guess what the rent control board hates? Yep, greedy landlords that clearly break all the laws. Coming out of this hearing, we win big. Due to the rent check/utility billing, we're found to be tenants even though we do not have a written contract. That was our biggest worry on our claim. Landlord is punished for not being registered or in compliance for years, well, really at all, so our rent is reduced to the original rent control amount, and it's retroactive, so our rent becomes $300 from the day we moved in. Oh, and we cannot be evicted just because the landlord feels like it. So doing the math, he owed us over $6,000 in overcharges for the past year and would only collect 30% of the current rate going forward. And of course, he also had a bunch of fines to pay the board. I don't remember, but I think it was more than what he owed us. So our new rent of $300 gets paid into an escrow account. It'll get released once he pays the fines and us our $6,000. Well, like 6 months go by, and I don't think he paid the fines. He did not pay us, and he's not collecting rent. Fingers still on the king. But he's not done yet. Obviously, renting any of the other units will be a problem for him rent-wise, so he then decides to play by the rules and serve an eviction notice for us based on one of the permissible rules. He is moving into the unit/taking it off the market. We know it's total BS, but it's in the rules. We can call him on it, but then we'll start spending dollars on a lawyer battle he can outlast us on. He has money and is losing money every day we're there. So we propose a compromise. And the king falls. We settle out of court. He agrees to a 1-year lease with us at $300 a month. We'll move out in a year, end of the school year/graduation for all 3 of us. He also signs over the escrow account to us and waives all owed rent to date. In the end, we saved $16,000. It was glorious, and we got 100% of our deposit, finder's fee, as part of our settlement agreement, and we stayed until graduation. Oh, and he did not rent out the other unit during this time, so he was out an additional $10,000 to $15,000. Keep in mind, this was an investment property, so I assume the property value dropped for the reduced income. And our next story. Demand we have a meeting for this? Okay. I once had a project manager named Shirley and a coworker named Alex. I was a computer programmer. Every morning, we, along with half a dozen other people, had a 5-minute-long meeting to discuss our progress and give people a chance to ask each other stuff. The boss was away on a 2-week vacation, and while he was away, the meetings were slightly more important, so we could coordinate ourselves without him to do it. Right before the meeting, I'd come to a roadblock because I couldn't remember what something in the programming was called. I just needed an actual word and I could continue, and I knew Alex would know it. At the meeting, Alex did his thing, a few other people talked, then it was my turn. I explained what I had done yesterday and what I was working on and said, "Hey Alex, do you remember?" At this point, Shirley interrupted and threw a screaming fit at me. How dare I try to have a discussion with someone without her? I pointed out that she was standing right there, and she demanded to know how dare I try to talk to someone without it being a scheduled meeting in the conference room in her presence. I pointed out that this was a scheduled meeting, we were in the conference room, and we were in her presence. How dare I presume to ask anyone anything without notifying her in advance that I would be doing so? I tried to explain that it was only a very brief question, and she flipped out that how dare I try to talk back to her about this? So having gotten an idea, I asked when we could have this meeting. She said 3 p.m. I knew damn well she had nothing to do before then. She just wanted to have something she could feel smug about. It was 9:34 a.m. at the time. She ordered that I was not to discuss it with anyone before the meeting, and I was not to proceed on the task without it, or I'd just be proving it wasn't actually important and I was wasting anyone's time. The meeting ended and we left. Alex worked about 10 feet away from me, so I could have just walked over and asked him, but I didn't. He sent me an instant message to know if I wanted to ask him whatever while she couldn't hear, and I replied that no, she wanted to be rude about it so she could reap the rewards of her actions. Alex and I had lunch every day, but I declined to talk about it. He knew I was up to something. At 3 p.m., he and I went into the conference room. 10 minutes later, she swanned in, closed the door, sat down, opened her notebook, uncapped her pen, wrote down the date and time and who was there, and told me I was now authorized to proceed. Hey, Alex, do you remember last week when we did task, you used a thingy that did thing? What was it called? He told me. Great, thanks. And he and I both turned to leave. It had taken all of about 20 seconds. Shirley flew into a rage. I was deliberately making a mockery of her by scheduling a meeting for something that would take 20 seconds. As I left the room, I said, Shirley, I warned you that this was a 1-minute exchange, but you insisted on a meeting. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. I made sure my timesheet reflected that I spent 9:35 to 3 p.m. doing nothing / waiting for Shirley. A day or two later, she flew into a rage at me again, and the entire staff was so enraged they told me they were quitting and asked me to join them. I asked him to wait a couple days, called my boss and told him, and on the next business day, I found he had returned early from his vacation and fired her. And our last story. This is written from the perspective of a person being screwed over by someone else's malicious compliance, and I'm loving it. I work for a medium-sized development company in a mid-sized city. The company has about 10 employees, and we collectively manage a little under $50 million worth of residential and commercial real estate. We are definitely understaffed. The person who owns the company has a temper, and as employees, a lot of what we do is to manage what information she knows about the company to keep her temper in check. Our longest-term employee is our amazing head of facilities, who's been with the company for about 8 years, and he knows / does everything, and we are always SOL without him because he's pretty amazing at his job. He can't even really take a day off without receiving at least a few phone calls from staff, even on his sick days. We just need him that badly. And being a great human, he's always there for us. Well, he made a pretty big mistake on Friday. because he's human. And it really isn't that a huge deal in that it didn't cost our company any money, we apologized, and everything is basically fine. However, the woman who owns our company accidentally saw an email about it on someone else's computer, and she lost her crap, and he received a 1-week suspension, as he has around a week's worth of built-up PTO, and even the woman who does HR/payroll thinks the suspension is unjust. It will be paid. And we're completely falling apart without him. I finally broke down and texted him for help, and he said, "Sorry, I'm suspended, can't help, LOL." The woman who owns the company was even asking where he was earlier when she couldn't find something. It's already epic, and we're only one day in. The employee in me is panicking, and the human in me is rubbing hands together in glee. Edit. 2 highlights of our struggles, though. The weather turned super cold, and our offices got super freezing. Everyone complained a bunch. I was proactive, found a thermostat, realized the AC was still on, and switched it to heat triumphantly. Everyone congratulated me. And then we stayed cold. In fact, we got colder. Next day, I realized I'd turned another part of our building to heat and not our offices. It was 64 degrees in our office. Well, I figured it out, and our offices got warm and warmer and then hot. By Friday morning, it was almost 80 degrees. We just ended up propping the fire escape door open as the heat ran all day Friday, and it was in the 40s outside. He really enjoyed that story when I told him about it this morning. We both laughed pretty hard. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.